The dog that rides the subway, and why his journey matters to you. What if the most loyal commuter in your city isn't a person at all? Why should you care about a dog on a train? Because in a world where everyone rushes past the lost and the lonely, one animal's journey can show us all the difference a little compassion can make, and remind us how a city's heart beats through those we choose to notice or ignore. The city was caught in the chaos of a transit strike. Trains ran late, buses were packed, and tempers were even shorter than usual. On that dreary Monday morning, Emma Lawson stood on the platform at Midtown Station, clutching her tote bag and a lukewarm coffee. She was a woman learning to live with silence, a recently divorced schoolteacher, her grown son living on the other side of the country, her apartment suddenly feeling like a cave. She was still getting used to the echoes. The crowd around her surged and parted as the first train rumbled in, the usual mix of exhaustion and impatience painted across every face. That's when she saw him. A German shepherd, large but lean, with a coat that had lost its shine and eyes sharp as flint. The dog sat, utterly motionless, at the far end of the platform, as if he'd been waiting for someone or something far more important than a train. People stepped around him like he was a trash can or an old bag, barely glancing his way. Emma stared, puzzled. Was he lost? Had someone abandoned him here? No collar, no leash, just that regal, unmoving presence. A flicker of recognition passed through her, the way you recognize loneliness not from the outside, but from something echoing inside your own chest. As the train doors hissed open, the crowd surged forward, sweeping Emma along. She kept looking back. The dog didn't move, didn't bark. He just waited. People grumbled about the strike, about delays, about everything but the dog on the platform. The next morning, Emma saw him again. Same place. This time the dog paced back and forth, sniffing the edge of the platform, occasionally glancing up, as if searching for a familiar face in the blur of strangers. A pair of teenagers giggled, tossing half a bagel in his direction. The dog ignored it, moving on with a kind of dignity that made Emma's heart clench. She lingered near him for a moment, offering a gentle, "Hey, buddy," but he only glanced her way and kept his distance. Day after day, Ranger, she started calling him that in her head, not knowing why, became a fixture of her commute. Sometimes he boarded the train, sometimes he waited. Once she saw him dozing in the sunlit corner by the vending machines, head on his paws, ears twitching at every announcement. Sometimes she noticed little things, the way his nose twitched when the trains screeched, the way he sidestepped crowds with an agility that suggested he'd been doing this for a long time. Then, everything changed one bitter, rainy morning. The platform was slick, puddles reflecting the harsh overhead lights. Emma was late. She hustled up the stairs and almost collided with a rush of commuters crowding the train doors. There was yelling, a commotion she couldn't quite see through the wall of people. Suddenly, a man in a suit, red-faced and angry, jabbed a finger at Ranger, who had managed to hop onto the train car. "Get that mutt off!" he shouted, voice booming. Without warning, he shoved the dog roughly with his briefcase, sending Ranger tumbling backwards onto the platform. There was a thud, a sharp yelp, and a sudden hush as the train doors slid shut. Emma's heart hammered in her chest. For a split second, everyone froze. Then, just as quickly, the city's normal rhythm resumed. People stepped around Ranger as he struggled to his feet, blinking, sides heaving. No one offered help. No one cared. Emma felt a surge of anger, a heat rising in her chest. Before she knew what she was doing, she marched over and knelt beside Ranger, reaching out a hand. "It's okay, you're okay," she murmured, ignoring the stares of passers-by. The dog flinched, but didn't run. "Hey, lady," "It's just a stray," someone muttered behind her. Emma whipped around. "So what?" she shot back, surprising herself. "Does that mean he doesn't deserve kindness?" The commuter shrugged and walked off, eyes glued to his phone. Emma stayed there for several minutes, shielding Ranger with her body as the next train pulled in. She heard whispers. Crazy woman, dog lover, wasting her time. For a moment, she almost believed them. But looking into Ranger's wary, intelligent eyes, Emma saw something she recognized. A need to belong, to be seen, to not be invisible in a world that seemed to move too fast to notice anything that didn't fit neatly into its schedule. The train came and went. The platform emptied. Emma sat with Ranger until he finally stood, shook the rain from his coat, and padded off toward the stairs. He looked back just once, his gaze locking with Emma's for a single heartbeat. Then he was gone. Emma rose, her knees stiff, her tote bag soaked. Something inside her had shifted, just a little, but enough to notice. The next morning, she packed an extra sandwich in her bag, and as she waited for the train, she found herself searching for a pair of brown, watchful eyes on the platform. She couldn't ignore Ranger anymore. What she didn't realize was how much she'd been ignoring in herself. The morning air felt sharper, colder, as Emma stepped onto the platform clutching a small paper bag. Inside was half a turkey sandwich and a few slices of ham. Nothing fancy, just something she'd hope a hungry dog would appreciate. She scanned the crowd, searching for the familiar outline of Ranger, the German shepherd who'd become the secret focal point of her routine. But he was nowhere in sight. Emma's heart dropped. She lingered near the edge, eyes darting back and forth. The crowd, as always, was oblivious. Headphones in, faces blank, eyes fixed on glowing screens. She wondered, not for the first time, how many other stories were being ignored each day in the city's rush. As she walked the length of the platform, she finally spotted him, Ranger, tucked behind a bench, eyes half closed, body tense, as if prepared to bolt at any moment. She approached slowly, lowering herself to the concrete, holding out a piece of sandwich. "Hey, Ranger," she whispered, her voice gentle, trying to sound as non-threatening as possible. The dog's ears flicked, but he stayed where he was, eyeing her warily. She slid the sandwich closer. He waited until she scooted back, then crept forward and devoured it in seconds, licking his lips and giving her a quick, guarded glance. For a moment, Emma felt a little burst of pride. But as she reached for her phone, thinking to snap a photo, Ranger bolted. His movement quick, almost panicked. He ducked behind a trash can and disappeared down the stairwell, swallowed by the river of legs and rolling luggage. Emma cursed under her breath. She jogged after him, weaving through the morning stampede, catching glimpses of his tan and black fur as he threaded his way through the crowd. Twice she lost sight of him, only to spot him again a block away, pausing at the edge of a busy street. Horns blared, the light changed, and for a terrifying second, Ranger darted into traffic. A city bus screeched to a halt. Emma's heart nearly stopped as Ranger cleared the bumper by inches, skidding to a stop on the far curb. A group of teens nearby laughed, pointing and jeering at the startled dog. "Hey!" Emma shouted, striding toward them, anger flaring. "Leave him alone!" The boys looked at her, one with a smug, mocking grin, then picked up a soda can and pretended to toss it at Ranger, who shrank back, hackles rising. Emma put herself between them and the dog. "What's wrong with you?" she snapped. "He's just scared." "Lady, it's a stray. Go rescue a cat or something," one boy scoffed, and the group melted away, still laughing. Ranger stared at her, unsure, sides heaving. Emma crouched, trying to appear small and unthreatening. It's okay, boy. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help. She extended her hand, but Ranger took a step back, glancing around as if looking for an escape. Feeling helpless, Emma fumbled for her phone and pulled up the number for the local animal rescue. The woman who answered sounded tired, her voice muffled by background noise. Animal rescue. How can I help? There's a dog, German Shepherd. He's been living at Midtown Station. He's scared. Almost got hit by a bus. Can someone come help him? Emma pleaded, feeling her voice tremble. There was a pause. We get a lot of calls like this, ma'am. But right now we're stretched thin. Stray calls are off the charts after the transit strike. I can put you on a list. Emma's frustration spilled out. He's not just a stray. He's riding the subway. People are being cruel to him. He could get hurt. Another pause. Then a second, softer voice joined the call. Hi, this is Kelsey Brooks. I volunteer with the group. I can check on him today. Can you text me his description and where you last saw him? Emma's relief was palpable. She texted a photo and waited at the corner, hands jammed in her coat, anxiety swirling. 20 minutes later, a petite woman in jeans and an old hoodie approached, waving. Emma, she called, a gentle smile breaking through the city's usual hardness. I'm Kelsey. They shook hands, and Kelsey's eyes, kind and patient, scanned the area. I know what it's like to worry about a dog no one else seems to care about, she said. I used to be a mess. Lost my job, felt invisible. One day I found a pit bull with a broken leg under a bridge. I spent weeks trying to catch her. She changed my life, made me feel like I mattered again. She grinned sheepishly. Sometimes rescuing them saves us too. Together they scoured the area, calling for Ranger, leaving bits of food, and asking transit staff if anyone had seen him. Most shrugged, a few shook their heads. He comes and goes, a janitor said. Never causes trouble, just slips in and out. Hours passed. Kelsey tried to coax Emma not to lose heart. Sometimes it takes a while, she said. Dogs like him, they've learned not to trust too easy. City's a hard place. At dusk, just as Emma considered giving up, they spotted Ranger at the far end of the platform, curled up in a shadowy corner. He looked at them, eyes bright but wary. Kelsey stopped Emma with a gentle hand on her arm. Let's sit. Don't crowd him. Let him come to us. They waited in silence, the city rumbling above, until Ranger edged closer, curiosity outweighing fear. He sniffed Kelsey's outstretched hand, then darted away, but not far, just enough to keep them in sight. As the sun dipped behind the high-rises, Emma felt something inside her settle. She realized she wasn't alone in caring. She had met someone else who understood what it felt like to be invisible, and the difference it made when just one person chose to see you. That night, as Emma walked home, she replayed Kelsey's words and Ranger's cautious, hopeful eyes in her mind. For the first time in ages, she felt a spark, fragile but real, of hope. The city's mornings started to take on a new shape for Emma Lawson. Every day, as she left her small, quiet apartment, she packed a little more than just lunch. Bits of chicken, cheese slices, soft treats tucked into a napkin, a bottle of water. She no longer rushed through the subway station lost in her own thoughts. Now she scanned the crowds, searching for the familiar outline of Ranger, the German Shepherd who haunted the station like a restless ghost. Some days, she'd spot him almost immediately, standing with watchful patience on the platform, just far enough from the tide of commuters to remain unnoticed. Other days, she'd wander the length of the station, peering under benches and behind columns, listening for the faint jingle of his steps or the soft thump of his body as he lay down to rest. The ritual became an anchor for her. When she finally spotted him, her heart would jump in her chest, a quiet thrill of recognition that banished for a moment the loneliness that clung to her since her divorce. But Ranger kept his distance. At first, he only came close enough to snatch food before darting away. Emma learned to sit with her back against the wall, leaving the food a few feet in front of her, resisting the urge to reach out. Sometimes, she'd talk softly about the weather, the day ahead, or even the memories that replayed in her mind. Her son's laughter when he was little, the way her ex-husband used to hold her hand at concerts, the quiet ache that settled in her chest each night in the silence of her apartment. On one gray morning, as the trains rumbled overhead, Emma found herself journaling on her phone, fingers moving restlessly across the screen. She wrote about Ranger, the way he moved through the world, careful but never truly afraid, independent but longing for something he couldn't quite trust. She wrote about herself, too, her failures, the way her marriage had crumbled beneath the weight of unspoken resentments and unmet needs, the growing distance between her and her only son, Tyler, now a college junior on the other side of the country. She wrote about loneliness, how it could become a habit as stubborn and persistent as hope. Her journal filled with thoughts she'd never spoken aloud, feelings she'd hidden even from herself. Sometimes she wondered if Ranger could sense her sadness, the way his eyes seemed to linger on hers a moment too long, the cautious tilt of his head when she sighed. "You get it, don't you, boy?" she whispered one afternoon, the station empty except for them. "You know what it's like, to want someone to just sit with you, even if they can't fix anything." Days slipped into weeks. Progress was painfully slow. Once, Ranger lay down just a few feet from her, chewing a piece of ham, his tail flicking nervously. Emma held her breath, barely daring to move. When a train screeched to a stop, he bolted, disappearing into the tunnel. But the next day, he was there again, waiting in the shadows. Kelsey checked in every couple of days, offering gentle encouragement. She brought treats, stinky liver bites that even Ranger found irresistible, and sat with Emma, swapping stories about the animals she'd rescued over the years. "Sometimes you just gotta be patient," Kelsey said, her eyes kind. "These dogs, they've learned the world isn't always safe. Trust takes time." Emma nodded, grateful for Kelsey's company, for her calm certainty that change was possible. Still, Emma had her doubts. One rainy evening, after a long, difficult day at work, she found herself lingering at the station long after the crowds had vanished. Ranger appeared at the far end of the platform, eyes shining in the half-light. Emma called softly, but he wouldn't come near. She waited, tears stinging her eyes, feeling foolish and defeated. "I don't know if I can do this, Ranger," she whispered. "Maybe I'm just making things worse. Maybe you're better off alone." For a long while, she just sat there, head in her hands, listening to the drip of water from the ceiling. Then she felt it, a gentle, almost imperceptible pressure against her shoe. She looked up. Ranger had crept closer than ever before, so close his head nearly touched her foot. He didn't look at her directly. He just let his head rest there for a few long seconds, the warmth of his fur a quiet miracle. Emma barely breathed, afraid to break the spell. Then, as suddenly as he'd appeared, Ranger pulled away, melting into the shadows. Emma pressed her hands to her face, laughter and tears tangling in her throat. That small gesture, so brief and so brave, gave her a hope she hadn't felt in years. She texted Kelsey later that night, describing the moment. Kelsey's reply came back almost instantly. "That's huge. You're doing more than you know. Change happens in tiny steps. Don't give up." Emma slept better that night, dreaming of soft fur and steady eyes. The next morning, she arrived at the platform earlier than usual, a new sense of purpose humming through her. She sat in her usual spot, journal in hand, and waited. Ranger appeared, a little less wary, a little more curious, as if sensing that the walls between them, built by heartbreak and fear, were starting to come down, one quiet moment at a time. For the first time in months, Emma felt as if she were waking up to a city she'd lived in for years but never truly noticed. Every morning she found herself on the platform, heart drumming with a quiet hope, watching for Ranger's familiar shape. The other commuters, wrapped in their own routines, headphones blocking out the world, still ignored both of them. But Emma's world was now defined by the subtle, silent dance between her and the wary German shepherd. She kept careful notes in her journal, what food Ranger preferred, which benches he napped under, which train lines he seemed to favor. One chilly morning, Kelsey joined her on the platform, carrying a small cardboard box and a determined look. "Today's the day," Kelsey announced softly, holding up a GPS collar. "We need to understand his routes if we're going to help him." Emma nodded, a mix of anxiety and excitement twisting in her gut. It took 2 more days before they got their chance. After a long wait and several attempts, Emma crouched near a bench, Kelsey sitting cross-legged a few yards away, a trail of treats leading up to the collar. Ranger finally crept close enough. Emma's hands shook as she gently snapped the collar around his neck, whispering, "Good boy, Ranger. You're okay. You're safe." Ranger flinched, but didn't bolt. For a moment, the women exchanged a look. Relief, triumph, a shared sense of mission. That afternoon, with the collar quietly pinging Ranger's movements to their phones, Emma and Kelsey became silent observers, following his journey through the city's veins. They watched as Ranger boarded a downtown train, slipping in just as the doors closed, his head low, his body relaxed as if he belonged there. No one paid him much mind. Some kids pointed, but mostly people ignored him. He rode for several stops, hopped off at a quieter station, trotted down the platform, then curled up under the far end of a bench for a brief nap. Later, he crossed the street, carefully navigating traffic, pausing at a bakery where an employee slid a crust of bread through the side door. Ranger's life was methodical and almost ritualistic. He knew which stations were busy and which were empty, which security guards ignored him and which would chase him off with a shout, where the scraps were, which doors offered shelter from rain. Emma was amazed by his intelligence, his survival skills. He moved through the city like a ghost who knew every hiding place and shortcut. Emma began to blog about Ranger's routines. She wrote in the evenings, propped up in bed with her laptop and a mug of tea, pouring out observations and emotions. The blog wasn't fancy, just a collection of stories and thoughts titled Notes from the Platform. She wrote about Ranger's daily routes, about his gentleness and caution, about her own struggle to connect with him and the world. She confessed how her life felt like it had shrunk after her divorce, how seeing Ranger every morning gave her something to look forward to, something that made her feel less invisible in a city of millions. Some days were easier than others. Occasionally, Ranger would appear to be waiting for Emma, sitting a little closer to her usual bench, his ears pricking up as she approached. Once he greeted her with a low, rumbling sound, almost like a sigh of recognition. Those moments filled her with a giddy, secret joy she couldn't explain to anyone except maybe Kelsey. "He's starting to trust you," Kelsey said, a gentle smile tugging at her lips. "That's huge, Emma." But there were setbacks, too. On rainy days, Ranger vanished for hours. Once, she saw a security guard chase him away with a broom, yelling curses. Emma felt helpless, clutching her bag of treats, torn between anger and despair. That evening, she wrote a post about how hard it was to let go of control, to accept that sometimes the people or animals you care about most can't be saved by sheer force of will. Sometimes all you can do is show up, day after day, and wait for trust to build. Through it all, Emma's emotional bond with Ranger grew. She realized how deeply she needed him, maybe even more than he needed her. Her loneliness started to feel less like a prison and more like a space she could fill with kindness, patience, and hope. One night, Emma got a call from Tyler, her son, out of the blue. He sounded distant, distracted, talking about school and friends and how busy he was. When Emma tried to share about Ranger, her words caught in her throat. She worried he'd think she was silly for caring so much about a stray dog. But Tyler just listened quietly, then said, "He sounds like a smart dog, Mom. I'm glad you have him." After that, Emma felt lighter. She knew the world wouldn't change overnight, but she could feel herself changing, slowly, the way the first rays of dawn soften the city skyline. And every time Ranger glanced her way, every time he chose to sit just a little closer, Emma's sense of isolation eased a bit more. In Ranger's ritualistic journey, she found a strange but beautiful kind of connection, not just to him, but to the city, to Kelsey, and maybe in small steps, back to herself. Emma had never thought of herself as someone whose words could ripple through an entire city. But in the weeks since she started Notes from the Platform, something strange had happened. Her quiet observations and photos of Ranger began to spread. It started with a few comments from fellow commuters. "I saw that dog too. He always seems to know where he's going, doesn't he?" Then came the shares, the emails from strangers, and one morning a reporter from the Metro Daily emailed her, asking if she'd be willing to talk. Emma hesitated. She'd started her blog as a way to process her own isolation, never expecting it to become anything more. But Kelsey nudged her. "People need stories like this," she said, her eyes shining with gentle conviction. "It's not just about the dog. It's about reminding people that even the invisible ones matter." Emma met the reporter, a young woman named Sarah Chen, at the station where it all began. Sarah was sharp, inquisitive, and kind, treating Ranger's story as something more than clickbait. She listened as Emma described the first time she saw Ranger, how he'd become part of her daily routine, how he survived and even thrived in the cracks of the city's busy life. Sarah took notes, snapped pictures, and asked to follow Emma as she checked on Ranger during her lunch break. The article ran on a rainy Thursday, complete with photos of Ranger's soulful eyes, Emma's handwritten notes, and even a quote from Kelsey about how one animal could unite a community. By the afternoon, the post was trending. People began to leave little gifts for Ranger. Treats, bowls of water, even handmade scarves with his name stitched in bright yarn. Kids drew pictures of him and taped them to subway walls. Office workers detoured on their commutes just for a chance to spot him and snap a selfie. But not everyone was supportive. Rumors and whispers followed Ranger now, growing with each new post and photo. Some claimed he was dangerous, that he'd once snapped at a child. Others insisted he belonged to a gang of thieves who used him to case the stations. Social media lit up with debates. Should a dog be allowed to ride the subway? Was the city being irresponsible? Was Emma even telling the truth? For the first time, Emma felt nervous approaching the platform. She noticed a pair of animal control officers lurking near the entrance, eyes scanning the crowds. Their van idled at the curb, the city seal emblazoned on the door. Her heart thudded painfully as she watched one of them set out a metal trap behind a column, baiting it with sausage. Kelsey showed up minutes later, face grim. "They're here because of all the attention," she muttered. "City Hall's worried about liability. They want Ranger off the trains, now." Panic bubbled up in Emma's chest. She scanned for Ranger, desperate to see him before animal control did. There, a flash of tan and black near the far end of the platform. Without thinking, Emma broke into a run, waving to Kelsey and shouting for the commuters to help. "Please, don't let them catch him. He's harmless. He's part of this city." At first, no one moved. Some people rolled their eyes or shrugged. But then a young woman in scrubs, an old man with a cane, and a couple of teenagers stepped in, blocking the officer's path. Kelsey squeezed through the crowd, kneeling and calling softly to Ranger. Emma dropped to her knees, heart racing, and tried to coax him closer. For a long, breathless moment, everything hung in the balance. The officers barking orders, the crowd's anxious energy, Ranger's trembling body as he hesitated on the edge of the chaos. Then something shifted. A little boy tugged on his mother's sleeve. "That's Ranger, Mommy. He's a good dog." The mother smiled and joined the human shield, standing shoulder to shoulder with strangers. One by one, more people lined up, forming a barrier between Ranger and animal control. Emma glanced at Kelsey, who nodded. "It's okay, boy. We've got you." Ranger crept closer, pressing against Emma's legs, trembling but safe for the moment. The officers, frustrated, radioed for backup, but the crowd wouldn't budge. Eventually, with muttered threats and promises to come back with the proper paperwork, animal control retreated. The platform buzzed with energy, laughter, and relief. Someone started clapping, and soon others joined in, cheering as Ranger, tongue lolling, sat beside Emma as if he finally understood that these people were on his side. Emma wiped away tears, overwhelmed with gratitude and uncertainty. Had she really helped Ranger, or had she made things worse by putting a spotlight on him? What would happen when the next wave of city officials decided to act? Kelsey pulled Emma aside. "You did good," she said quietly. "But this isn't over. The city will push back. We'll need to organize, get support, show them that Ranger's story matters." That night, Emma posted a new entry to her blog, raw and unfiltered. "Today, I saw strangers come together for a dog who rides the subway. I saw the best in my city, and the worst. I hope we choose compassion again tomorrow." The story was out of her hands now, swirling through the city like a gust of wind, impossible to contain. But for the first time, Emma felt the power of community, the strength that comes when ordinary people decide, for just a moment, to notice the invisible and stand up for something good. A storm was brewing, and it wasn't just in the sky. The city was split in two. Those who saw Ranger as a symbol of hope, and those who saw him as a problem. For Emma, every day felt like walking a tightrope over a churning crowd. She clutched her phone, constantly checking social media and emails as Ranger's story spread beyond the city's borders. People debated his fate on morning radio and talk shows. There were interviews, heated town halls, and even a late-night host who joked, "If that dog ever runs for mayor, he's got my vote." But behind the headlines, city officials were uneasy. The Transit Authority and City Council began discussing a proposal. All animals would be banned from public transit, no exceptions. The news hit Emma like a punch in the gut. Overnight, the welcoming bowls and homemade signs at stations disappeared, replaced by stern new warning posters. "No animals on subway by order of City Hall." Kelsey didn't let the setback slow her down. She started a petition online, "Let Ranger ride," and soon thousands of signatures poured in. Local businesses hung up flyers. Volunteers gathered outside City Hall, holding up photos of Ranger with signs that read, "Compassion is not a crime." Emma found herself drawn into a whirlwind of activism, pushed by her own conscience and the people around her, who now believed in something bigger than a stray dog. Despite the groundswell of support, the city pressed on. They called a public hearing, and Kelsey convinced Emma to speak. Emma spent sleepless nights drafting her testimony, her words fueled by memories of mornings on the platform, the quiet joy of seeing Ranger's ears perk up when she arrived, the way he'd learned to trust her in tiny, hard-won increments. On the day of the hearing, Emma walked into City Hall with Kelsey and a small crowd of supporters. The room was packed, city officials in stiff suits, animal control officers with notepads, and reporters clustered near the front. When her name was called, Emma stood, palms sweating, and made her way to the microphone. She looked out at the sea of faces, took a shaky breath, and began. "My name is Emma Lawson. I'm a teacher, a mother, and a lifelong resident of this city. But most recently, I've become known as the woman who feeds a subway dog." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Emma continued, voice growing stronger. "Ranger isn't just a stray. He's gentle, he's smart, and he's touched more lives than I can count. In a city where most people rush by each other without a second glance, Ranger reminds us to look up, to notice, to care. Taking him off the trains isn't just about a dog. It's about what kind of city we want to be. Do we make room for compassion, or do we close the door?" As she finished, applause erupted from her supporters. Emma stepped aside, heart pounding, and watched as Kelsey took the mic next. Kelsey's voice was steadier, shaped by years of rescue work. "Banning animals from transit won't solve the real problems," she said. "But helping Ranger, and others like him, can show us how small acts of kindness ripple outward." The city council listened, stone-faced, jotting notes. Emma couldn't read their expressions, but she saw the tension in the room, the line drawn down the middle of her city. Outside, the fight took a darker turn. Animal control, embarrassed by their failed attempt to catch Ranger, began setting traps in secret. Word got around that a new officer, a man named Sharp, was in charge. Sharp was known for his tough tactics, and rumors swirled about his plans. Baited cages hidden near Ranger's usual haunts, tranquilizer darts, late-night sweeps. Emma and Kelsey did their best to warn the community. They posted updates online, alerted volunteers to dismantle traps, and even started walking Ranger's known routes late at night to keep him safe. The city seemed to tighten around them like a fist. Then, one morning, Ranger didn't show up. Emma waited on the platform long after her train had left, scanning the crowds, the tracks, the benches. Nothing. Panic rose in her chest. She texted Kelsey, who replied instantly, "I haven't seen him either. Stay hopeful. We'll search." For days, there was no sign of Ranger. Emma's blog filled with desperate updates. "If anyone sees him, please let us know." Supporters scoured the neighborhoods, checked alleys and abandoned buildings, but it was as if Ranger had vanished into thin air. The city's mood shifted too. Strangers approached Emma on the street asking, "Have you heard anything?" Some people blamed her, muttering that all the attention had finally put the dog in danger. Emma felt crushed under the weight of responsibility. She replayed every choice she'd made since first noticing Ranger. Had she done the right thing? Or had she only made things worse for the dog she'd come to love? One night, she sat in her silent apartment, staring at the empty leash she'd bought for him, her hands trembling. Kelsey called, voice soft. "You did what you could, Emma. Don't lose hope. Dogs are survivors, especially this one. He's out there somewhere. Emma wiped her tears, staring into the city's dark skyline. If there was one thing she'd learned from Ranger, it was this: hope survives in the smallest places. She clung to that, determined not to give up. Not yet. Emma woke up each morning with a new ache in her chest, an emptiness that felt bigger and colder with every day Ranger remained missing. The city around her pressed forward, horns blaring, crowds flowing, new crises pushing old news to the back pages. But in Emma's world, everything felt frozen. She still rode the subway, still checked every platform, every shadow, every corner, always searching for the familiar glint of Ranger's eyes. Her bag was always a little heavier, packed with food and a spare leash, hope refusing to die even as doubt grew heavier. Kelsey refused to let Emma give up. "We don't stop looking until we know for sure," she told her one night over the phone. Emma could hear Kelsey's dog barking in the background, a comforting, living sound. "I know what it's like, Em. When I lost Willow, my old rescue, I thought the world would never be right again. But it was the search that kept me going, not the end. Sometimes the trying is what saves us, not just the finding." Emma tried to hold on to that. She organized an online search party, writing a new post. "If you see Ranger, message me. Let's bring him home." Hundreds of people responded, some with false alarms, others with blurry photos of similar-looking dogs near train stations, under bridges, even napping behind dumpsters. Emma and Kelsey followed every lead. They left flyers in laundromats, delis, gas stations, anywhere a lonely dog might wander for warmth or scraps. One afternoon, 3 days into Ranger's disappearance, Emma received a private message on her blog. It was short, shaky, written in rough handwriting, photographed and sent by someone named Marcus. "Saw your dog, black and tan, limp in his step. He's in the old tunnel off 32nd, near the river. Been feeding him what I got." Emma's heart leapt. She called Kelsey, who was out the door in minutes. "He's alive," Emma breathed, her voice breaking. "He's out there waiting for us." They grabbed flashlights, bags of treats, and gathered a small group of volunteers from the online community. As dusk settled over the city, they made their way to the abandoned tunnel, nervous but determined. The area was bleak. Rusted fences, old graffiti, the lingering smell of wet concrete and garbage. Emma's shoes squelched in the mud as she followed Marcus, a wiry older man in a threadbare jacket, who nodded silently and pointed. "He's scared, won't let nobody close, eats, then hides." Emma called softly into the darkness. "Ranger, it's me. It's okay. I brought dinner." Her voice echoed through the tunnel. She heard a shuffle, the faintest whine. Kelsey motioned for everyone to sit and wait, letting the quiet work its magic. Minutes ticked by, then a pair of glowing eyes reflected in the beam of a flashlight. Ranger stood just beyond the light, his body tense, dirty but unmistakably him. Emma's heart hammered. She held out a piece of chicken, whispering, "Come on, boy. We're here. We missed you. It's okay." He hesitated, one paw lifted, tail low and wagging in slow, uncertain beats. The group remained silent, not daring to breathe too loud. Kelsey gently tossed a treat halfway between Emma and the dog. Ranger sniffed, crept forward, took the treat and looked up, his eyes meeting Emma's for the first time in days. She felt tears sting her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere," Emma whispered. "Not until you come with me." She lowered her head, willing herself to wait, to trust the bond they'd built. Slowly, Ranger inched closer. He nosed the treat in Emma's hand, then, trembling, rested his head against her palm, the weight and warmth of him anchoring her to the earth. Emma wrapped her arms gently around Ranger's neck, sobbing into his dusty fur. "We found you," she choked out. "We found you, you stubborn, beautiful boy." Around her, Kelsey and the others cheered softly, but the moment felt private, sacred. Ranger licked her face once, tentatively, and then allowed her to slip the spare leash over his head. They walked back through the tunnel together, Emma and Ranger side by side, Kelsey's hand on her shoulder. Marcus trailed behind, smiling quietly, his good deed done. "Thank you," Emma said, turning to him as they reached the street. Marcus just shrugged. "He's got people now. That's more than most of us." Word spread quickly. Emma updated her blog. "Ranger is safe. Thank you, everyone." The post filled with messages of relief, joy, and gratitude. People she'd never met left comments about their own lost pets, their own stories of rescue and second chances. Emma realized then, Ranger's journey was no longer just his or hers. It belonged to everyone who'd ever hoped, ever hurt, ever searched for something missing in the world. That night, as Emma watched Ranger curl up on an old blanket in her living room, she felt the emptiness in her heart begin to fill. She needed Ranger's trust as much as he needed her compassion. Maybe that's what healing was. Two souls, battered but unbroken, meeting in the middle of the world's noise and chaos, finding comfort in the simple act of being seen. The city kept moving outside, indifferent and loud. But inside Emma's apartment, there was a quiet, unbreakable bond, a reminder that being lost wasn't the end, and that sometimes, if you keep searching, you find exactly what you need. In the days after Ranger's rescue, something shifted across the city. People who had never spoken to each other before now traded stories about a dog who braved the subway alone. Kids begged their parents to ride an extra stop just in case they might catch a glimpse of him. Strangers nodded at Emma in the street, a small secret passing between them, a sign that, for a moment, compassion had cut through the city's noise. The outpouring of support for Ranger stunned even the most cynical city officials. The online petition had ballooned overnight, picking up signatures from local politicians, business owners, and even a few celebrities. Emma and Kelsey found themselves fielding phone calls from reporters, radio hosts, and a popular TV anchor who wanted to run a story on the subway dog and the city that found its heart. For Emma, the whirlwind was both thrilling and surreal. The solitude she'd carried for so long was replaced by a network of people rooting for one small, battered dog. At City Hall, public pressure forced officials to rethink their hardline stance. The Transit Authority quietly began developing a pilot program. Ranger would be granted special community animal status, allowing him to ride the subway and be cared for by both city employees and a team of volunteers. The new rules also provided regular vet checkups, a custom tag, and a brightly colored collar that marked Ranger as a friend, not a stray. On the morning Ranger received his new collar, Emma stood beside him, her hands trembling with pride. Kelsey was there too, smiling through happy tears as they watched a small crowd of commuters and officials clap and snap photos. Even the station manager, usually stern and impatient, knelt down to scratch Ranger's head. "He's part of the city now," he said. "He's earned it." Local businesses joined in, setting up water bowls and treat jars near entrances, hanging signs that read, "Welcome Ranger," along the tracks. The bakery that once left out scraps for him now posted a menu board that read, "Dog treats for Ranger and friends. Ask inside." Sometimes Emma caught herself smiling at the small changes. A toddler pointing in delight as Ranger walked by. A police officer offering a friendly wave. Two older women chatting about how that dog brings out the best in people. The city felt lighter, more connected, as if everyone was in on a secret. And Ranger seemed to sense it too. He carried himself with new confidence, tail high, greeting regulars with a nuzzle or a wag. But even with his new status, his routines didn't change much. Every morning, he waited at the platform, always on time. He'd ride the train to his favorite stops, nap in the sunlit patch near the vending machines, and always return to Emma at the end of the day. It was as if he'd chosen the subway and her as his home. One evening, Emma received a text from Tyler, her son. "Can I visit this weekend?" She read the words 3 times before replying. Tyler hadn't been home in months, their conversations mostly reduced to quick calls and messages. Emma worried he'd see her devotion to Ranger as a replacement for the family they'd lost. But Tyler showed up on Saturday, backpack slung over his shoulder, taller and older than she remembered. He watched quietly as Emma greeted Ranger at the station, as she offered him a treat and ruffled his fur. "He really trusts you," Tyler said, a note of wonder in his voice. Emma smiled. It took a while, but he's family now, in his own way. They walked the city together, Emma, Tyler, Ranger trotting alongside. Tyler asked questions about Ranger's routine, the people who cared for him, and the fights Emma had fought for his safety. He listened without judgment, his eyes softening as he watched the gentle way Ranger moved through the world. When they stopped for coffee, Ranger curled up at Tyler's feet, resting his head on his shoe. Tyler grinned, nudging Emma. "Guess he likes me." That night, for the first time since the divorce, Emma and Tyler cooked dinner together. Over spaghetti and garlic bread, Tyler admitted, "I was worried about you, Mom. After everything, I didn't know if you'd find your way back." Emma reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "I think Ranger found me first. He showed me that you can lose everything and still find something worth loving again." They fell asleep to the soft sounds of city traffic and Ranger's gentle breathing, a kind of peace settling in that Emma hadn't known in years. The next morning, Tyler accompanied Emma and Ranger to the subway. As the train doors slid open, Ranger stepped inside confidently, his bright collar gleaming. Emma hesitated, glancing at her son. "Go on," Tyler said. "He's got you. You've got him." Emma smiled, tears threatening to spill over, and boarded the train with Ranger. She watched the city flash by outside, the skyline golden in the morning light. Her heart full in a way she'd never expected. Ranger became more than just a symbol. He became a daily reminder that home isn't a place but a feeling. It's the warmth of connection, the kindness of strangers, the second chances we grant each other and ourselves. The subway, once a place of isolation and routine, was now alive with possibility. People smiled at each other. They helped a lost tourist, carried groceries for an elderly neighbor, shared stories about Ranger's latest adventures. And every night, Ranger would come home with Emma, curling up by her feet, as if to say, "This is where I belong." Tomorrow he would return to his rounds, but tonight he was home. The months that followed Ranger's official welcome into the city's heart brought changes that Emma never could have predicted. It started with small things: a shy smile from a subway conductor, a wave from a young father whose daughter insisted on bringing Ranger a homemade treat, neighbors who finally introduced themselves after years of silent commutes. But as Ranger's legend grew, so did the sense that something deep within the city had shifted. One morning, Emma found herself sitting opposite a news anchor, her hands folded nervously in her lap as a camera crew arranged lights around her small living room. The producer smiled reassuringly. "We want to hear what Ranger's journey means to you and to this city." Emma took a deep breath, looked at Ranger curled at her feet, and began. "At first I thought I was just helping a stray dog," she said. her voice trembling slightly. But I was the one who needed help. I was lonely, invisible, just another person rushing through life, never really seeing anyone. Ranger changed that for me. He made me look up, pay attention, and realize that every soul matters, even the ones most people ignore. The anchor leaned forward. Why do you think so many people connected with his story? Emma glanced out the window, searching for the right words. We're all a little lost sometimes. We all build walls to survive heartbreak, divorce, losing someone, being left behind. But when you risk kindness, when you notice someone else's pain, those walls start to come down. I think Ranger reminded people that it's okay to care, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. The interview aired nationwide, and Emma's inbox exploded with messages. Strangers sharing their own stories of loneliness and hope. Teachers asking if they could read her blog to their students. Animal rescue groups seeking advice on building community support. One man wrote, "I haven't spoken to my neighbor in 10 years, but today we laughed about Ranger together on the train. Thank you for helping me see people again." Ranger's influence spread far beyond the subway. At the main station, a bulletin board overflowed with notes. "Saw Ranger today. He made my morning." My daughter smiled for the first time in weeks. "Thank you, Ranger, for reminding us to slow down." Other commuters began carrying treats, some leaving toys for strays in the neighborhood. Volunteers started a weekly compassion walk, inviting people to bring their own rescue animals and share stories. Kelsey, now a fixture in Emma's life, spoke at a city council meeting. "Healing is never one-sided," she told the packed chamber. "Sometimes saving a life means saving your own heart in the process." The room fell silent as she described her years of feeling small and overlooked, and how caring for a scared, unwanted dog had pulled her back from the edge. "Ranger taught me that hope isn't just for animals, it's for all of us." Emma shared that sentiment during a radio interview. "Second chances aren't just for strays," she said quietly. "We all deserve to be seen, to belong." I spent so long thinking I'd missed my moment for happiness, but Ranger showed me that sometimes life gives you a detour, not a dead end. The real journey starts when you risk opening your heart, even after it's been broken. The city itself began to reflect that change. The transit authority painted murals of Ranger at 3 main stations, one showing him riding a train surrounded by smiling commuters, another of him curled up beside a tired nurse, a third capturing his playful spirit as he greeted a group of children. Local newspapers ran editorials calling for more community animal programs, and other cities reached out, wanting to replicate the model. But Emma noticed the biggest change in the quietest places. People who once averted their eyes now nodded hello on the platform. Kids offered seats to older passengers, and laughter drifted down the train cars where there had once been only silence. One morning, Emma watched as a group of teens helped a lost dog find its owner, something that would have been unthinkable just a few months before. Through it all, Ranger remained humble, if a dog can be called that. He continued his routines, greeting Emma at dawn, making his rounds across the city, napping in sunny patches, and returning home each night. Emma often found herself reflecting on the lessons she'd learned. Not just from Ranger, but from the people who'd stepped up to help, the neighbors who'd become friends, the strangers who were now part of her life. She wrote about it in her blog, now read by thousands. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is keep showing up. Kindness doesn't fix everything, but it makes the journey bearable. I used to think I was saving Ranger. Now I see, we're all just travelers, looking for someone to sit with us on the ride. Emma and Kelsey started hosting workshops at the library, at community centers. even at the subway itself, teaching people how to recognize signs of loneliness and reach out, how to care for stray animals, how to build bridges in a world of invisible walls. Near the end of autumn, Emma and Kelsey walked Ranger down to the river, where the city lights shimmered on the water and the breeze smelled of leaves and possibility. "Do you think he knows?" Emma asked, scratching Ranger's ears as he watched the boats glide by. "That he changed so many lives?" Kelsey smiled, her arm linked with Emma's. "I think he knows he's loved, and maybe that's all anyone ever really needs." As the sun set, painting the city in gold and pink, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She'd come to understand that every heartbreak, every moment of loneliness, was just part of the journey, a journey that brought her here, to this moment, with friends, hope, and the dog who taught a city to care. Months slipped by, seasons changing in subtle ways that only those who truly watched the city could see. The trees along Main Street blushed red and gold before turning bare against a silver winter sky. The subway, once a tunnel of anonymous faces, now pulsed with a new kind of warmth, a shared understanding that even in a place built for rushing and retreating, kindness could linger and grow. Ranger became more than a mascot or a local legend. He became a symbol of hope. As part of the city's new community animal policy, more dogs, and even a few cats, were spotted riding the subway, wearing bright collars and gentle expressions. Other cities called to ask how they could start their own programs. The city's animal shelters reported a record number of adoptions, inspired by the stories circulating around Ranger and his friends. Emma's blog, Notes from the Platform, had taken on a life of its own. She never expected that her reflections, once meant for no one but herself, would reach so many. Publishers reached out, and soon her stories became a book. The first printing sold out within days. Bookstores hung banners in their windows, read the story that made a city care. Schools used the book in lessons about empathy and community. Emma and Kelsey, once two quiet voices in the crowd, were now invited to speak at schools, libraries, and neighborhood meetings, teaching workshops on kindness, animal care, and how to notice the invisible among us. Ranger, of course, had no idea he was famous. His world was made of simple joys: the sound of a train pulling in, the scent of Emma's hand, the familiar faces who greeted him by name, the weight of a child's head resting against his flank as she read aloud on the morning commute. He would ride the trains in the morning, always returning to Emma by dusk, the pair walking home together beneath the city's shifting lights. The subway itself felt different now. People looked up from their screens. They smiled at each other, exchanged news, and sometimes, without saying a word, simply shared the comfort of presence. A lost wallet was returned with a note. From a friend, for Ranger. Strangers greeted each other at stations with a, "Seen our dog today?" More than one commuter, when faced with trouble or sorrow, found someone to sit with them, remembering the story of a dog who refused to give up on connection. Emma's relationship with her son, Tyler, deepened in quiet, unexpected ways. He visited more often, bringing friends to meet Ranger, helping Emma and Kelsey at their workshops. One rainy Sunday, the three of them, Emma, Tyler, and Kelsey, stood in the bustling main station, handing out hot coffee and pet treats. "I never thought this would be our life, Mom," Tyler said, a gentle smile in his eyes. "But I'm proud of you, of all of this." Emma squeezed his hand, glancing down at Ranger. "I used to think I'd lost everything," she admitted. "But then I realized, sometimes you have to lose your old life to find the one you're meant for." With Ranger by her side, Emma found courage she didn't know she had. She reached out to her ex-husband, not to rekindle what was gone, but to share stories and laughter over coffee, healing the small wounds that time alone couldn't touch. She grew close to Kelsey, their friendship deepening with each shared triumph and setback. Together, they built a circle of support for people and animals alike, a family forged not by blood, but by kindness and the willingness to begin again. One golden evening, Emma, Tyler, Kelsey, and Ranger sat together on a bench overlooking the city as the sun dipped behind the skyscrapers, painting the world in soft orange and pink. Ranger lay with his head in Emma's lap, eyes half closed, tail flicking contentedly. The three of them sat in companionable silence, watching the lights flicker on across the skyline. "I still can't believe how much has changed," Tyler said quietly. Kelsey nodded, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "It all started with one dog, one act of kindness, and look what happened." Emma looked down at Ranger, smiling. "Sometimes we're all just travelers, sometimes lost, sometimes found. But when you risk opening your heart, you find the world waiting to meet you halfway." As the last rays of sunlight faded, Emma felt a sense of peace and gratitude so profound it almost hurt. She had learned that heartbreak is not the end. It's an invitation to begin again. She had seen what happens when one person dares to notice the lonely and the lost, how small acts ripple outward, changing lives, healing wounds, building something lasting and real. On the subway, someone started a conversation with a stranger. At the park, a child knelt to comfort a nervous dog. In homes all across the city, people read Emma's book and hugged their pets a little tighter, holding on to hope and second chances. Ranger, ever humble, never changed who he was. He still made his rounds each morning and settled each evening by Emma's feet. But his journey had taught a city to open its eyes, to see each other, and to believe that no one is truly invisible. As Emma closed her journal that night, she wrote her final thought. "We are all just travelers, sometimes lost, sometimes found. When you risk opening your heart, you find the world waiting to meet you halfway. So if you ever ride the subway and notice a dog sitting calmly, watching the world with gentle, patient eyes, remember Ranger. Remember that a second chance can change everything. And don't forget to like, share, and follow for more stories of hope and kindness. Because every act of compassion matters, and you never know whose life you might change, starting with your own."